In conversations about Pokemon sprites versus models, the sprites usually end up being titled as the superior. So, in defense of the models, let's look at some of the rarer instances when 3D beats 2D, in my opinion of course. Rarely any man wants to talk about anything being small, but Torkoal finally proves that less can be more. Now, of course, it's a matter of personal opinion, just like how much inches is big or small. But for me, having only a small smoke cloud instead of being surrounded like a vape kid makes Torkoal's quality shine, while also the cloud is more smooth, unlike the blocky movement with the sprite. Usually a duo that gets shafted sooner than that one Happy Meal toy you completely forgot about, Volbeat and Illumise finally have something that you rarely get to see in 3D Pokemon games: a lot of personality. Even before Scarlet and Violet, both of them had quite joyful energy to them. But now that they are in Paldea, they even have a special separate 3D pose when flying that greatly resembles how they looked back on the DS. So if you somehow prefer that look due to their movements, they redo that while still looking greatly saturated and good as they did before, if not even better. Hitmontop is a pretty polarizing Pokemon when it comes to its appearances in the second and third dimension, so there's no concrete reason as to why one could be better than the other. Do you prefer it cosplaying as an Anthro Beyblade? Or are you a fan of dance moves that make you self-conscious about your skills on the dance floor? Basing on the descriptions and of course the video topic, you probably can guess in which camp I'm sitting. When making the sprite for Grumpig, someone made it clearly just to check it off and move on to the rest. But after jumping into the third dimension, Grumpig grew an extra pair of balls on its forehead and started to dance with joy when realizing it doesn't have to fight for its life by jumping every second. Hear me out. Although it's kind of cheap to say it, the way Sudowoodo has static behavior works well due to its Pokédex entries and lore based on it mimicking a tree. So laziness for the win? Gotta love an intentional attention to details, or a working smarter rather than harder situation. If there ever would need to be Pokemon selected to be the poster child for this case of models being better than sprites, Rotom would 10 out of 10 times be the top contender. The quick and spasmy manner in which Rotom moves simply cannot be replicated as effectively as it needs to be in 3D, which ends up as a result as the main Pokemon discussed in this video. Ursaring being in a constant pose of whoa, chill out, I don't want any trouble, and having textured fur that makes it truly feel like a bear only works in such a way that a sprite that is waving its hands around like a dad sitting in the couch and watching his favorite team losing in football cannot compete with. Now I did say the Sudowoodo barely moving was better in 3D due to lore and whatnot, which Cacturne also does in its sprite form. So with what hypocritical shenanigans am I going to justify Cacturne's model being better than the supposed closer to the lore equals better reasoning I used before? He does the same thing as the sprite, but it also now looks like it's dancing. Yay! This is definitely about to be the most controversial opinion from me in this video, but the more serious and ready to go battle pose Lucario has in Scarlet and Violet, while also now having a much darker tone on all the black spots, make it look so much better and match the serious tone that it is usually portrayed to have in places like the anime. Just because one bad apple went off to practice hypnosis on a kid instead of the usual Paris no one cares about, a bunch of Hypno get a lot of smack for no reason. Now they need to change their look and rock a new fit. That just makes them look more guilty. I mean, they do look creepier if that's what they are going for. Oh my gosh, the lore! Keeping it simple, Toxicroak has two phases. Back in the day of 2D, it constantly was in a phase of stumbling drunk home every Friday evening after a night at a local bar, or standing up like a Mortal Kombat character in 3D and ready to pounce at you with the power of Arceus and anime on its side. Now that I reminded you that Magcargo exists, the next question is, what makes the 3D version better than the sprite? Well, where do I start? The cracks on the shell highlighted by the lava already makes it greater, but the cherry on top, the bubbles that form and end up popping in a satisfying loop for a second, make me forget about Paldea phasing in and out of existence. Yeah, right, that's a thing. Weirdly enough, Luxray is one of the very small percent that are surprisingly desaturated in 2D, yet more colorful and richer in tone with its 3D likeness. Chef's kiss already, but wait, there's more. Awesome battle stance, the now cliche mention of it actually having fur, but now if it only had some good physical electric moves. Now sure, Charizard is the golden child of Game Freak and whatnot, but it doesn't mean the fella still doesn't have any misses. Comparing to the Sword and Shield model, there's not even a contest. But when it inevitably showed back up again in Gen 9, the new battle stance blows the bent over, Kyphosis ridden Gen 5 Charizard out of the water. Both Croagunks are fairly similar, but the one that definitely wins and more is its chill, carefree-natured idle pose that makes Croagunk stand out way more, while feeling like a much more intriguing and fun Pokemon. Dude's looking good and he knows it. Bringing up Mirror B's dance instructor, Ludicolo is just a question of preference about how you enjoy your pixels on the screen dancing and flailing around to look like. Either painfully tiptoeing across hot rocks or turning Peekaboo into a dance move. Honestly, the opinion on this guy can change however much you want, but ones from Colosseum and XD are in a league of their own. Once again, Mr. Mime is another instance of the sprite being worse sheerly due to the limitations of how the sprites worked. Up until Gen 5, Mr. Mime couldn't portray its mime-like movement at all, but even in black and white, there's nothing that conveys the inspiration. But when 3D rolled around, they perfected the mime since day one and justifiably did not get changed up till this day. Its painting animation is also so funny to see as well. Looking at Mewtwo in the 2D era has always left us with a sense of intimidating presence that a legendary should always exude. Then somehow, Mewtwo returned, with an event in Scarlet and Violet that introduced us to a remodel that brought a hard Gold and Soul Silver sprite into 3D and left the others looking like goofy knockoffs. Just me? Yeah, I know. Eelektross' battle pose does not look nearly as great as it does in Gen 5, but I only said the battle pose. Although being a rarer sight, when Eelektross is hanging out with the boys and enjoying life on land, we get to catch a glimpse of our sucky sucker rocking the pose of the now nostalgic 2D sprite. 13 years now? Jeez. I don't know what specifically does it for me, but Druddigon feels more expressive and imposing in 3D. Either it's because the design wasn't fully set in stone with Gen 5 being its first iteration, or the restriction of 96 by 96 pixels limited how big it could be, hence Druddigon feeling much less threatening in 2D. Actually, both options probably happened. We all know how Pokemon in Gen 5 got improved textures and whatnot, while also getting some of their models remade, like the previously mentioned Charizard, right? Well, one of these things were making steel Pokemon actually look like they're made out of steel. Case closed, good job Game Freak, 10 out of the game. With the main topics done, let's look at some honorable mentions. Compared to Persian in Gen 8, please don't bother. But with a brand spanking new model and rocking up to make some pay-field days in Paldea looking like a real puss, you bet I ain't looking back with this easy choice. Now sure, Wigglytuff and co pretty much are just living versions of balloons, but personally, I prefer my imaginary creatures to look less like the last bit of empathy left their body and more just like a jiggly little buddy that would love to groove out instead. Yeah, Muck expanding and retracting in 2D is cool and all, but 3D got it beat. Dripping sludge, liquid running down across Mug's body, and more expanding than retracting. And the 3D era gave us Alolan Muck, but that's more bias than you can take, baby. It may be due to me just getting attached to my Golem in a DLC playthrough and seeing the small stuff, but the Ferrero Rocher mascot looks way better than before. Instead of whatever those pew green things were on the DS covering it, it actually is now covered in rocks and turns into a literal boulder when following you. The debate about Golem was already sealed way back in Let's Go when you could cosplay and mimic Indiana Jones. Let me know your favorite model in the comments and remodel the subscribe button down below. Stay tuned for more!